Okay, so you get it. Next point, the acquisition of language, right, the ability to acquire language, reinforces the arbitrary association of signal and signification as law. Now that is about as paradoxical, that is about as contradictory a statement as exists, but it is completely right. And this is where semiological discourse, this is where semiotics discourse gets very, very confusing. So I'm going to make sure that you understand what that means, right? The last bullet point on page 9, the acquisition of language reinforces, right? Remember, acquisition means that I have acquired it, right? So here's my birth, here's my death, here's my death, here's language before me, here's language after me, here's where I am now. I acquire language. I've acquired language, right? Somewhere around the age of, I don't know, and I don't know this, I would say maybe 2 to 3, 1 to 2, something like that. They have this thing your baby can read, whenever the earliest stages of that is. I mean, that's insane. It'd be interesting to look up the PhD, I know he's a PhD, the guy who invented your baby can read, what his background is. As a matter of fact, I might do that. It would not surprise me that he had a background in either communication theory or semiology or something, because genius idea, right? Your baby can read, blah, blah, blah. So, the acquisition of language reinforces the arbitrary association of signal and signification. But it's not only that it reinforces that arbitrary association, it reinforces it as law, right? So the arbitrary becomes codified, in a sense. Not in a sense, that's exactly what happens. The fact that I speak English, and the fact that we use shoe in English to mean something like the material that's worn on your feet, or some derivation of that, or some version of that, is completely arbitrary, because we could have used some other word. But that we use that word, and that the linguistic community has selected that term, it necessitates that if I am a speaker of English, if I am a native English speaker, or if I'm attempting to learn English, that I recognize that that's the word that we've selected. And it's law. That's the word that we selected. Shoe is not used to mean go left, right? Shoe is used to mean stuff that goes on your feet. Okay. Note, and here's a very important point, and I brought this up just to sort of show you the significance again of, why is this important? Why should I care? Here's why you should care. Note, this arbitrary association is the condition for the possibility of our socialization, right? And the way that I'm going to demonstrate, the way that I'm going to prove this, is by talking about feral children, right? The feral child. And I'm sure all of you have heard about this. Feral, the feral child. For those of you who don't know what a feral child is, a feral child is a child who's so tragically abused and isolated from society. I mean, I think one of the first feral children was a French girl, and she was locked in I don't know exactly how the story goes, but, and it's a true story, it was some version of this. She was locked in a closet for like 8 or 10 years. She was fed through the closet. You know, she basically lived her life in an enclosed dark space for years on end as like a perverted, sick crap, just sick crap, right? So I don't like talking about stuff like that, but you know, so she's isolated from everybody, and they're not, obviously her biological parents, if you want to call them that, aren't communicating obviously with her, so she's just locked in and fed and kept alive. So she's eventually rescued, and the community of language speakers attempt to teach her language, and what we recognize as linguists is that there is a time frame in which you have an ability to acquire language, after which point, if you don't acquire it, you'll never acquire it. But not only if you don't acquire it, you'll never acquire it, if you don't acquire it, you'll never acquire the ability to socialize properly. And I don't know if it's as severe as this, but I think my memory serves me right. She walked on all fours, she couldn't communicate, she defecated at, you know, anywhere. She basic sort of, you know, processes that we use to govern our social conduct and our language. She was neither able to, and I think it might be, I might be exaggerating it a little bit because I don't remember the story. And as a matter of fact, if one of you viewers are still watching my series in semiotics and you know, send me a link to it so that I can just have a refresher, so that for my own personal knowledge, because I don't quite remember the story, but that's the idea, right? The feral child is isolated from the community from love, obviously from affection. She's isolated from, or he is isolated from language, and there comes a point at which that will never reverse itself, right? So it's proof, the existence of the feral child is proof of the power that language acquisition has, and also sort of the temporality, the temporal sensitivity in acquiring this language. Not only to function as and participate as a speaker of the language, that's sort of a cursory level, but also it complicates our ability to socialize. Right? It complicates our ability to govern ourselves in quote-unquote I hate the word civilized, but I don't know of another term, right? Semiotic problem. I need to come up with another term for civilized. Let's do away with the word civilized. Let's, new academics, come up with a different word and throw that one in the garbage, right? I hate civilization. Freud has something amazing to say about civilization and his discontent, but I'm not going to get into that now. But yeah, you know, to make this person sort of, function in a civilized manner. Words escape me. So the point is, this relationship between the words that we use, between the sound patterns that we use, between the signals that we've selected arbitrarily, and their relationship to the signification, the meaning, the concepts, is the structure, what Lacan calls the Saussurean algorithm, in Lacanian terms, that serve as what I'm going to say is the condition for the possibility of our thoughts. Right? You can't think of signification independent to signal. You can't think of signal independent to signification. If you can, let me know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it can be done, but I don't know. And that's the point of the question that I was asking before. Right now we're getting warmer. I think in the next video series I'd have to look, but I think in the next video series I approach the initial question I asked you about sort of what is the semiological status of the signal, right, the sound pattern, the signal inconceivable, and the signification, the concept, ineffable. Right? Now you should really see why that question is just, I don't think it's a light question at all, right? It might have already been answered. I don't know. You know, I haven't read all there is to read on semiology. Really and truly, I just read the seminal text, and everything else I sort of whatever. But and that's not knocking all the semioticians who've done work and the semiologists who've done work. I just just stick with the seminal text, and because I'm not a linguist, so I'm a genocide scholar, so I read all of the genocide stuff. But all the other stuff I just read sort of the seminal text, and I move on from there. Yeah, I mean, how do you answer that? There needs to be an answer to that, right? I haven't complicated the problem, but you should start to see that the questions that I asked, they strike at the heart of what it is that semioticians are doing. And then the last thing is an example, and I'm not going to write it on the board, but it's an example, a contemporary example at the top of page 10. And the example is this. I've used this example a billion times. J.R. Rawlings uses the sound pattern muggle, right? So she uses muggle as a signal, and muggle in her text, and she as an individual did this. She uses muggle to point to this idea of an individual who cannot practice magic, right? And to my understanding, she coined the phrase muggle. The idea of coining this phrase muggle is interesting. Why? Because what she did is, insofar as she's created the Harry Potter series, she introduces this narrative to the linguistic community. Right? She recognizes her role. Very, very smart woman, right? She recognizes her role, and she recognizes that as an individual, there's no way for her to transform language proper, though we do and we manipulate speech all the time. So what she does is she introduces the term muggle as a sound pattern, as a signal, which points to, which triggers, which leads us towards the concept an individual cannot practice magic. And insofar as readers of the community and readers of the Harry Potter series and us at large recognize that, to my knowledge, there wasn't a term that existed prior to her coining that phrase, that now, look, yeah, we do have that concept, someone who does not practice magic, and it needs to be articulated, it needs to be associated with a particular sound pattern, it needs to be associated with a particular signal, it needs to be associated with a particular signifier, either way, saying the same thing. She introduces it to the linguistic community, and it worked. The point is, it worked because the linguistic community accepted it. If the linguistic community would have read that and said, oh no, this rubbish, right? The idea that muggle will be used to represent the concept of an individual that doesn't practice magic sounds too close to muddle, M-U-D-D-L-E, which means to fumble and to you know, I see what you're doing, but no, we don't like muggle. We'd rather you use muddle, or we'd rather use a different term. She wouldn't, you know, her series would have flopped. The linguistic community has to, in a sense, sign off on that. Now, to make life easier, when I talk about people who practice magic, why invent a new term, right? Oh no, the linguistic community's already used the term muggle. They've accepted muggle, so now when you write, people say muggle. Similarly with Tolkien's use of, I think it was org. I might be mistaken. I'm a nerd, but I'm not that nerdy. But I'm almost positive that it was it org or ogre or something. But Tolkien introduced. We know that Tolkien was a linguist and actually created language from scratch. It's not that you can't do this, right? I don't want you to think that you cannot create language from scratch. I mean, it's been done. People do it. Tolkien did it. The thing is that there needs to be a community of users that use this language to transform the meaning of things in the world. And Tolkien, on a uber nerd level, created a language to govern sort of the realm of Middle Earth. And I guess in a sense, if you were going to do a creationist account of semiology, it would have to be something like that. It would have to be something, and now I'm off on a huge tangent, but it would have to be something like God or whatever pre-existing non-human being had this structure, and it was, you know, I don't know. So anyway, so that's that. It gets too deep. Even for me, it gets to a level where you're just like, okay, yeah, there it is. I told you I was going to give it to you dark and deep. So with that being said, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. This concludes this section of the analysis. I will continue with the next section. I'm not sure which one it is. But thanks a lot for watching. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. Goodbye.